Hi, I'm Jessie, a 24-year-old ceramic artist and small business owner. In this video, I'll be taking you through my process of making linocut stamps for pottery and also showing you how I've used these stamps in my past work. I hope this video inspires you to get creative with it and make some fun stamps of your own. The materials I used to make these stamps are linoleum block, a linoleum carving tool, a pencil, a ruler, and an X-Acto knife. And you can get all these materials at a craft store or online. First, I plan out my designs in a sketchbook, thinking through the positive and negative space, which areas of the design I want to keep and carve away, and also visualizing how they'll show up on the surfaces I stamp them on. When planning though, keep in mind that your design will be flipped backwards when you use it as a stamp. I've made countless prints with backwards lettering, so I always have to remind myself to flip the image before drawing it onto the linoleum block. I then just draw my designs on the linoleum block with a pencil. I usually have references or visuals in front of me to make the drawing process a lot easier. Next, I just start carving away. Here, I'm using a stiffer linoleum block called Battleship Gray Linoleum. I found that the gray block is better for more intricate designs than the pink because it allows for sharp and clean cuts, and you can get a lot more variation in line width based on the amount of pressure you put when carving. I purchased the gray linoleum block online and the pink linoleum at a craft store. I would suggest practicing on a little piece before jumping straight into it, just to get a hang of the amount of pressure needed, the pacing, which carving attachments are best suited for whatever designs you choose, stuff like that. The name of the game here is patience and gentleness for sure though. For most of these stamps, I used the smallest carving attachment because I wanted to make the stamps as small as I could with the most amount of details possible. After carving, I went ahead and cut my designs out. I used an X-Acto knife here, but there's probably a more official tool used for this part. An X-Acto knife did the job though. I had to be pretty precise with the cuts on some of these stamps I made because the edges on the designs I chose would show up when using them as stamps. So I took my time there and made sure that was all good and clean. And then that's it. Now here are some of the ways I use these stamps and also some of my tips and tricks. Hopefully this gives you some good ideas for how you can use them in your pottery. Up first is underglaze printing. You can play around with the layouts of the stamps and get a bunch of cool designs by layering with different colors or positioning the stamps in different ways. There's a lot you can do with it here. With the bigger stamps, I used a fan brush to paint a thin layer of underglaze onto it and then used the stamp before the underglaze had time to dry. I took my time pressing all parts of the stamp onto my cup to make sure all parts of the image were transferred. I needed to restamp some areas occasionally to make sure all parts of the image were on the piece. On both greenware and bisqueware, you can use a pencil to clean up some of the messy lines by scraping away at it when the design is still a little bit wet. If you use a pencil on bisqued pieces, keep in mind that the glaze might repel where the graphite is. To fix this, I usually rub my finger on the spots where it repelled to even out the glaze on the cup and also add more glaze to those spots so it covers up the graphite. For my smaller stamps, I use the gray foam inserts that come in the self-supporting cone boxes as a makeshift ink pad. All I did was paint a spot of underglaze onto the foam using a fan brush and used it like a normal ink pad. I slowly built up the underglaze on my stamps by lightly dabbing them into the underglaze pad. I like doing it this way as opposed to buying underglaze stamp pads because it's cheaper, I can use any of the underglaze colors I have, and I feel like I have a little more control over how much underglaze transfers onto my stamps. I also played around with the Sgraffito technique where I carved away at a stamped solid underglaze design. I used a solid bird stamp and carved some feather details into it. On some of those cups, I also used the mishima technique where after the first kiln firing, I painted a different color underglaze in the feather carvings and wiped away with a wet sponge until only the underglaze remained in the carvings. I sadly don't have any clips of me doing this though, so I apologize for that. The last stamp technique I used on my pottery is an embossing technique to create fun textures. I used my smaller stamps to press into my leather soft to leather hard forms. I made sure to keep a supporting hand on the inside for the stamp to have a somewhat sturdy surface to press into so the details all show up. I would say it's best to use these stamps on leather soft to leather hard work. Here I'm showing the cup I'm using is leather hard because the rim doesn't deform all that much when I put a bit of pressure on it. Instead of using a supporting hand on the inside, you can also place something like an empty glaze bottle or a bisqued cup on the inside of your leather hard pieces, so you can have a bigger and more supportive surface for stamping. The key is to find something that fits pretty snug on the inside of your piece. The second way I incorporated an embossed element into my work is by stamping onto slabs to make little embossed tiles to attach onto my cups. I rolled out a 1/4 inch slab of clay, compressed the slab using a rubber rib tool, and started stamping directly onto the slab. Placing the slab of clay on a smooth wooden surface, or a surface that will draw a little bit of water out of the clay, will be best so it doesn't stick to the table as you stamp. This slab method gives you a lot more control with the stamps, and you can get deeper impressions doing it this way. After using your stamps, you can either cut out a strip of clay and hand build something out of it, or you can cut out little tiles, let them firm up a bit, smooth out the sides, and slip and score them onto your pottery, which is what I did here. I firmly pressed all parts of the stamp into the cup so they're secure. I like to leave the slip that spills out from pressing the stamp, let it firm up a bit, and press it back into the seams to ensure that the seams are all compressed and no cracks form. Or you can add a thin coil to the outside, either way works. For me, it's more efficient to do the dried slip as my coil. There's a lot of different ways that you can play around with these stamps. I liked combining both the underglaze and embossing techniques in my most recent cup collection to add texture and dimension. I'm sure there are many more creative ways to use these stamps, so be sure to let me know if you think of any other cool ideas. I would love to get inspired by you guys. Now, here are some of my finished pieces using the handmade stamps. I hope you enjoyed this video and it got you excited to make some cool stamps for your pottery. Thanks for watching. I will see you next time.